Beginnings in the kitchen. Daniela Reyes wiped the sweat from her brow as she stared at the imposing iron gates of the Morgan estate. Her entire culinary career had led to this moment, a 6-month contract as private chef to Theodore Morgan, the reclusive tech billionaire whose security system patents had revolutionized the industry. The pay would clear her mother's medical debts and maybe, just maybe, provide enough seed money for the small restaurant she'd dreamed of since culinary school. "Identification, please," a disembodied voice requested from an intercom disguised. As a decorative stone, Daniela held up her credentials to the nearly invisible camera. After a moment of silence, the massive gates parted with a soft hum. The driveway stretched before her like a winding river of pristine concrete, flanked by perfectly manicured gardens that seemed untouched by human hands. Mrs. Winters, the household manager who had interviewed her 3 weeks prior, waited at the entrance of the sprawling contemporary mansion. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight bun, her posture ramrod straight. "You're precisely on time, Ms. Reyes. Mr. Morgan appreciates punctuality." She didn't smile, but her eyes held a warmth that contradicted her formal demeanor. "I'll show. You to your quarters first, then the kitchen. Mr. Morgan has specific dietary requirements that were outlined in your contract." "Yes, I've memorized them," Daniela replied, trying to mask her nervousness. "Low sodium, no refined sugars, emphasis on lean proteins and complex carbohydrates." Mrs. Winters nodded approvingly. "Very good. Mr. Morgan rarely enters the kitchen or dining areas. He prefers meals to be left in his study. You likely won't see much of him." The staff quarters were luxurious compared to Daniela's studio apartment in the city. Her bathroom alone was larger than her entire living space back home. The kitchen, however, was what took her breath away, gleaming copper pots hanging from a rack, state-of-the-art appliances, and a refrigerator the size of her first car. "This is ... Daniela ran her fingers over the cool marble countertop. "Overwhelming," Mrs. Winters suggested. "You'll adjust. The other staff members are currently on leave, Mr. Morgan's request. He's working on a new project and values his privacy. It will just be you, me, and Mr. Morgan for the next few weeks." After a thorough tour and detailed instructions, Mrs. Winters left Daniela to prepare dinner. According to the schedule, Mr. Morgan dined precisely at 7 each evening. Daniela lost herself in the familiar comfort of cooking. She decided on a simple but elegant first meal, perfectly seared Chilean sea bass with a miso glaze. Accompanied by roasted vegetables and quinoa, she plated the dish, adding a small edible flower as garnish. She felt a presence behind her. "You're not using prepackaged stock," Daniela startled, nearly dropping the plate. Standing in the doorway was a tall man with intense gray eyes and dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. He wore simple, expensive clothes, a charcoal sweater, and tailored slacks. Theodore Morgan was younger than she had expected, perhaps. Early 40s, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the permanent furrow between his brows. "No, sir," she answered, recovering quickly. "I made it fresh this afternoon." He approached, examining the plate with clinical precision. "Most chefs cut corners when they think no one is watching. I don't believe in corners when it comes to food, Mr. Morgan." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps before he nodded once. "Carry on." As he turned to leave, a shrill alarm suddenly pierced the air. Red lights flashed from discrete panels in the ceiling. "Sector 4, an automated voice announced. Initiating lockdown protocol." "Not again," Theodore muttered, pulling out his phone. Metal shutters began descending over windows and doors throughout the house. "What's happening?" Daniela asked, heart racing. "False alarm. Glitch in the new system I'm testing," he replied, fingers flying over his phone screen. "Unfortunately, once initiated, the lockdown can't be overridden for 24 hours. As the final door sealed with a decisive thud, Daniela realized with dawning horror she was now trapped in the mansion with the world's most reclusive billionaire and his homemade sea bass. The walls between worlds the first night of the lockdown stretched into an uncomfortable silence. Theodore retreated to his study, leaving Daniela alone with her thoughts in the cavernous kitchen. She spent hours reorganizing pantry shelves to calm her nerves, sending occasional texts to her mother to explain the situation. "You should get some rest." Mrs. Winters appeared in the doorway around midnight. "The guest suite in the East Wing is prepared. The lockdown protocol affects the external security system, not the interior doors." Daniela nodded, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her shoulders. "Will this affect my position here?" she asked, the worry evident in her voice. "Mr. Morgan doesn't blame you for the system malfunction." "If that's your concern," Mrs. Winters replied with a hint of amusement. "In fact, I believe he was impressed with your dinner. He sent his compliments." The guest suite was palatial, with floor-to-ceiling windows now covered by impenetrable metal shutters. Despite the luxurious bed, Daniela slept fitfully, dreaming of metal walls closing in around her. Morning brought a new challenge. Preparing breakfast for a man she barely knew, but was now effectively sharing a home with. She decided on a Japanese-inspired meal: miso soup, steamed rice, grilled fish, and tamagoyaki, accompanied by fresh fruit. To her surprise, Theodore appeared in the kitchen just as she was finishing the preparations. "I usually take breakfast in the solarium," he said, hands in his pockets. "Since we're both trapped here, you might as well join me." The solarium was a glass-enclosed space that would have offered breathtaking views of the mountains had the security shutters not been in place. Still, the room maintained an airy feel with its abundance of tropical plants and subtle lighting. "You're from the Bronx," Theodore stated as they ate, breaking the silence. It wasn't a question. Daniela raised an eyebrow. "Yes, does that surprise?" Your resume mentioned Le Cordon Bleu, not a common trajectory." "I had a scholarship," she replied, then added with a small smile, "and 3 jobs." Theodore nodded, studying her with those intense gray eyes. "Your mother is ill." Daniela stiffened. "You've been researching me?" "I research everyone who enters my home," he said unapologetically. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3.
Atch 3.
Treatment. Memorial Sloan Kettering. Expensive." "Yes." "Is this an interview or an interrogation, Mr. Morgan?" Daniela placed her chopsticks down carefully, keeping her voice level despite the anger bubbling inside her. Something shifted in his expression: discomfort, perhaps even embarrassment. "Neither. I apologize for the intrusion." He paused, then added quietly, "My mother died of pancreatic cancer when I was 19. The revelation hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. Daniela's anger dissipated, replaced by a strange sense of connection. "The doctors give mine a fighting chance," she offered. "The new immunotherapy treatments show promise." Theodore nodded, returning to his meal. They ate in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. "The tamagoyaki is perfect."
Ow.
"Not too sweet." "Thank you. It was my father's favorite." Daniela hesitated, then added, "He taught me to cook. He had a small restaurant in the Bronx before he died." "What happened to it? Rent increases? Corporate development? The usual story?" She shrugged, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. "My dream is to reopen it someday with a few modern twists." Theodore considered this as an admirable goal. The day passed in a strange dance of avoidance and unexpected encounters. Theodore spent most of his time in his study or lab while Daniela explored the mansion's permitted areas. By evening, she had designed an elaborate dinner that challenged both her skills and the kitchen's resources. When Theodore entered the dining room, he stopped short at the sight before him. Daniela had transformed the formal space with subtle lighting and arranged the meal as an artistic composition of colors and textures. "This is," he began, uncharacteristically lost for words. "Food should engage all senses," Daniela explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "My father used to say that a meal should tell a story." "And what story is this telling?" Theodore asked, taking his seat. Daniela gestured to the deconstructed bouillabaisse before him. "It's about transformation. It's elements that seem disparate coming together to create something unexpected." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. How appropriate. As they shared the meal, the walls between employer and employee, billionaire and chef, began to blur. Theodore spoke of his early days coding in a garage, while Daniela described culinary disasters from her student days. Laughter, rare and precious, echoed in the high-ceilinged room, Later that night, Daniela stood in the darkened kitchen, gazing at the metal shutters that separated her from the outside world. She was startled by Theodore's voice behind her. "The system glitch was my fault," he admitted. "I've been working on enhanced security protocols for high-risk environments, hospitals, schools." He paused. "I've been isolating myself too long. I've forgotten how to interact with people who aren't lines of code. Is that why the staff is on leave?" Daniela asked softly. Partly, he acknowledged. "Also because the anniversary of my mother's death is approaching. I prefer to be alone then." "And now you're trapped with a stranger." Theodore's gaze met hers in the dim light. "It's not quite a stranger anymore, I think." She returned to her suite. Daniela realized that the walls of the mansion no longer felt like a prison. They were simply the boundaries of a new world, one where a chef from the Bronx and a reclusive billionaire might find unexpected common ground. Recipes for truth on the third day of their confinement. Rain lashed against the metal shutters, creating a soothing rhythm that filled the mansion. Daniela woke early, inspired by the weather to create comfort food with an elevated twist. At the time Theodore emerged from his quarters, she had prepared cardamom-spiced French toast with caramelized pears and a side of perfectly crisped turkey bacon. "You're up early," he commented, accepting the coffee she offered, black with a single cardamom pod, as she'd noticed he preferred. "I've always done my best thinking in the kitchen before dawn," she replied. "My father called it the honest hours, when the world is quiet enough to hear your own thoughts." They settled into a comfortable routine, taking breakfast together. In the solarium, afterward, Theodore would retreat to his lab, while Daniela experimented with new recipes or explored the mansion's impressive library. That afternoon, Daniela discovered a neglected herb garden in one of the indoor courtyards. She was on her knees, examining the withered plants, when Theodore found her. "Mrs. Winters used to maintain this," he explained, watching as Daniela gently turned the soil. "After she injured her back last year, no one continued the work. These can be saved," Daniela murmured, inspecting a struggling rosemary plant. "They just need attention and care." Theodore knelt beside her, surprising her. "Show me how." For the next hour they worked side by side, replanting, watering, and pruning. Theodore's hands, so precise with technology, were awkward with the delicate plants, but he followed Daniela's instructions with uncharacteristic patience. "My mother had a garden," he said suddenly, as they finished with the last pot of thyme. "Not herbs, flowers. Peonies were her favorite. After she died, I couldn't bear to look at them. Had them all removed." Daniela remained silent, sensing that words would break the fragile moment of disclosure. "The security system that malfunctioned," he continued, "it's part of a larger project. Predictive medical technology that could identify pancreatic cancer at stage 0 before symptoms appear." He looked down at his soil-stained hands. "Too late for her, maybe not for others." "That's why you live like this?" Daniela asked softly. "Isolated, focused entirely on your work." "The world is full of distractions," he replied. "Ain't. But people who want things from me? Here, I can work without interference." "But at what cost?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Theodore's expression hardened momentarily, then softened as he met her gaze. "That remains to be seen." That evening, Daniela prepared a meal unlike any other she had made at the mansion. Simple, rustic dishes that filled the kitchen with familiar aromas. Comforting aromas her father's recipes from the Bronx restaurant. When Theodore entered the kitchen, drawn by the smells, she gestured to the informal table in the corner rather than the formal dining room. "Tonight, we eat here," she said with quiet confidence. "This is how my family shared meals." Theodore hesitated, then took a seat at the small table. Daniela served sofrito-infused arroz con gandules, slow-roasted pernil, and a simple salad with her father's secret vinaigrette. "This isn't on my approved meal plan," Theodore observed, though without criticism. "Sometimes the soul needs nourishment as much as the body," Daniela replied. "This was the meal my father made whenever someone in our family was facing a difficult time. He believed that certain recipes could speak truths that words couldn't express." Theodore took a bite, and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted in his expression. "It's extraordinary. It's honest food," she said simply. "No pretense, no performance, just truth." As they shared the meal, Daniela told him about her childhood in the restaurant kitchen, about watching her father create magic from simple ingredients, about the community that gathered around their tables each night. "After he died, my mother tried to keep it going," she explained, "but then she got sick, and the medical bills. ... She trailed off, pushing a piece of pork around her plate. "That's why this job means so much. It's my chance to reclaim what we lost. And reopen the restaurant Theodore finished for her, yes. Not just for me, but for him. For the neighborhood that's losing its identity to gentrification." Daniela looked up at him with sudden intensity. "What about you? What dream drives your work beyond honoring your mother's memory?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for so long that Daniela thought he might not answer. "Connection," he finally said, the word sounding foreign on his lips. "The technology I'm developing could connect patients to life-saving treatments before they even know they're sick. Could connect doctors to data that would make impossible diagnoses possible." He paused. "Ironic, isn't it? I create systems designed to connect people, yet I've isolated myself completely." "Not completely," Daniela said quietly. "Not anymore." Later that night, as Daniela was closing the kitchen, Theodore appeared with a bottle of aged rum and 2 glasses. "My father's favorite was bourbon," he said, pouring small measures for each of them. "We never spoke much, but we would sometimes sit together and drink in silence after my mother died. It was his way of showing solidarity, I think." Daniela accepted the glass, recognizing the gesture for what it was. Not just a drink, but a door being cautiously opened. "To honest food," Theodore said, raising his glass. "And difficult truths," Daniela added, meeting his toast, as they sipped the rich amber liquid. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the shutters, and the walls of the mansion seemed to expand around them, no longer confining but sheltering. The storm's revelation on the 4th morning. Daniela woke to a different sound against the shutters, not the gentle patter of rain, but the howling fury of wind. The mansion's automated systems had compensated for the power fluctuations during the night. The emergency lights in the hallways indicated that something was amiss. She found Theodore in the security center, a room filled with monitors displaying various angles of the property. On the screens, trees bent sideways under the force of the storm, and debris flew through the air like projectiles. "Category 3 hurricane," he explained without turning. "Unexpected shift in trajectory." "The forecasters missed it. Will the lockdown protocol released today as scheduled?" Daniela asked, watching as a branch crashed against one of the cameras, momentarily distorting the image. "It should, but it won't matter. The roads are already flooded, and the wind speed makes evacuation impossible." He finally looked at her, his expression grim. "We're effectively trapped for at least another 48 hours, lockdown or not." Mrs. Winters appeared in the doorway, her usual composure slightly frayed. "The east wing is taking on water, Mr. Morgan. The reinforced windows are holding, but there's seepage through the foundation." Theodore nodded, already moving toward the door. "Show me." Daniela followed them through the winding corridors to the east wing, where water was indeed pooling on the marble floors. Theodore immediately began issuing directives, his voice calm, but authoritative. "We need to move everything from the lower shelves in the library. Mrs. Winters, activate the secondary pumps for the east quadrant. We'll need towels, plastic sheeting from the maintenance room." He turned to Daniela. "God, use your help." For the next several hours, they worked side by side, moving valuable books, securing artwork, and creating barriers against the encroaching water. Theodore moved with purpose, his usual reserve replaced by focused energy. Daniela matched his pace, anticipating needs before they were voiced by mid-afternoon. They had contained the worst of the flooding, but the storm showed no signs of abating. The mansion groaned under the assault of wind and rain, its formidable structure tested. "By nature's fury, you should rest," Theodore told Daniela as they finished securing the last of the vulnerable areas. "You've been working non-stop. So have you, she countered, noticing the fatigue lining his face. I'm used to it. No one gets used to this, Daniela said, gesturing to the chaos around them. Not even reclusive billionaires. A flash of amusement crossed his features. Perhaps you're right. They made their way to the kitchen, where Daniela quickly prepared a simple meal of soup and sandwiches. As they ate, the lights flickered ominously. The backup generator should engage automatically, Theodore said, just as the mansion plunged into darkness. Emergency lights activated seconds later, casting everything in a soft blue glow. Theodore was already on his feet, moving toward the security center with Daniela close behind. The primary generator has failed, he announced after checking the systems. The auxiliary power is routing to essential functions, only security. Minimal lighting, refrigeration. What about heat? Daniela asked, suddenly aware of the dropping temperature. Limited. The central zones of the mansion will maintain adequate warmth, but the extremities will cool significantly. He turned to her, his face half-shadowed in the emergency lighting. We should consolidate to the main living areas. They gathered blankets, candles, and supplies, creating a makeshift living space in the great room with its massive stone fireplace. Theodore built a fire while Daniela arranged their provisions. Not exactly what you signed up for when you accepted this position, Theodore remarked as they sat before the crackling flames, mugs of tea warming their hands, cooking for a reclusive billionaire during a hurricane while trapped in a mansion under lockdown. Daniela gave a small laugh. Oddly enough, it wasn't covered in the job description. Theodore's laugh, in response to the first real laugh she had heard from him, transformed his face entirely. Erasing years of solitude and worry, I imagine not. As the night deepened and the storm raged, they talked by firelight. Theodore spoke of his early years as a prodigy in computer science, of the pressure that came with extraordinary intelligence, of the loneliness of always being the outsider. I built my first security system at 12, he revealed. Not for a house, but for my room. I wanted one place where no one could reach me, where I could just ... be. And now you've built the ultimate version of that childhood room, Daniela. Observed Theodore was silent for a moment, watching the flames. I never thought of it that way. What would 12-year-old Theodore think of the man you've become? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implication. Finally he answered, he would be impressed by the technology, disappointed by the isolation. And what would he think of me being here? Daniela asked softly. Theodore's gaze shifted from the fire to her face, his expression suddenly vulnerable in the flickering light. He would think it was terrifying and necessary. A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the shutters, breaking the moment. Theodore stood, moving to check the security monitors once more. The storm's center is passing directly overhead, he reported. The worst should be over by morning. When he returned to the fireside, he sat closer to Daniela than before. Night stretched on, their conversation meandering through subjects both profound and mundane. At some point, exhaustion overtook them, and they drifted to sleep side by side on the makeshift bed of blankets. Daniela woke to the sensation of warm thought from the now smoldering fire, but from Theodore's arm draped protectively around her waist. In sleep, his face had lost its perpetual vigilance. Appearing younger and at peace, she carefully extricated herself without waking him and moved to the windows. Through gaps in the shutters, she could see the first pale light of dawn. The wind had diminished to occasional gusts, and the torrential rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. Is it over? Theodore's voice came from behind her. I think so, she replied, turning to find him watching her with an unguarded expression that made her heart race. Daniela, he began, then stopped, seeming to search for words, a rare occurrence for a man of his eloquence. Before he could continue, a mechanical whir filled the air as the metal shutters began to retract. Sunlight spilled into the room, illuminating the aftermath of their night by the fire, the tangled blankets, the empty mugs, the intimacy of their shared space. The lockdown protocol has released, Theodore said unnecessarily, his eyes still fixed on her face. So we're no longer trapped, Daniela stated, the words carrying a weight beyond their literal meaning. "No," he agreed quietly. "We're not." In the harsh clarity of morning light, something fragile hung between them, connection forged in extraordinary circumstances, now facing the test of ordinary reality. "The roads will still be impassable," Theodore added quickly. "Communications might be down for another day or so." Daniela nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying. Their shared isolation wasn't quite over. "Then I should probably start on breakfast. We've got a lot of cleanup ahead of us." As she turned to leave, Theodore caught her hand. "Daniela." Her name on his lips sounded different now. Not an employer addressing an employee, but a man speaking. To a woman who had somehow breached walls he'd spent a lifetime building. "Thank you for your help during the storm. For everything." She squeezed his hand briefly before releasing it. "That's what happens when people connect, Theodore. They help each other through the storm." Beyond Golden Gates, the aftermath of the hurricane brought a flurry of activity to the previously quiet mansion. Crews arrived to clear fallen trees and repair minor structural damage. The regular staff returned, casting curious glances at their employer, who now took his meals in the dining room rather than his study, and occasionally ventured into the kitchen to watch Daniela work. 2 weeks after the storm, Daniela received a call from her mother's oncologist. The latest scan showed remarkable improvement. The tumor had shrunk by almost 60%. When she shared the news with Theodore over dinner, his response surprised her. "I'd like to meet her," he said. "Your mother." Daniela nearly dropped. "Her fork, you want to leave the mansion? Voluntarily?" A faint smile touched his lips. "It has been known to happen. Rarely." The following Sunday, Theodore's sleek electric car pulled up outside the modest apartment building in the Bronx, where Daniela had grown up. He seemed oddly at ease in the neighborhood, drawing less attention than she had feared in his simple but expensive clothes. Elena. Reyes welcomed them with the warmth that had defined Daniela's childhood, embracing Theodore as if he were an old friend rather than one of the wealthiest men in the country. "So you're the man who's been eating my daughter's cooking," she said, leading him into the small living room fragrant with the scent of sofrito and simmering beans. "You look better than your pictures." "Less severe," Mama Daniela admonished. But Theodore laughed. "Your daughter has had a humanizing effect on me, Mrs. Reyes." Lena's knowing smile made Daniela blush. "Call me Elena and tell me, what are your intentions with my Daniela, Mama?" Daniela exclaimed, mortified. Theodore, however, didn't seem discomforted by the direct question. "I'm still figuring that out," he answered honestly. "But I know that. My life is better with her in it." The simple declaration hung in the air, charged with possibility. Later, as they helped Elena prepare dinner, Theodore proving surprisingly adept at following culinary instructions, Daniela observed the ease with which he had stepped into her world. This man, who had built walls both literal and figurative to keep people at a distance, was chopping onions in her mother's kitchen and laughing at her childhood stories. On the drive back to the mansion, Theodore was quiet, seemingly lost in thought. "Thank you for today," Daniela said, breaking the silence. "It meant a lot to my mother." "To me?" Theodore nodded, his hand steady on the steering wheel. "I've been thinking about what you said during the storm about connection, and I've made a decision." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I'm converting part of the mansion grounds into a culinary school and restaurant incubator for underprivileged youth." Daniela stared at him in shock. "Theodore, I'd like you to run it," he continued. "Design the curriculum, select the students, mentor them. The restaurant would showcase rotating chefs from the program, with you as the executive chef overseeing it all." "But what about being your private chef?" she asked, trying to process the enormity of what he was proposing. A smile touched his lips. "I was hoping our relationship might evolve beyond employer and employee." The implications of his words sent a warm flush through her body. "Are you offering me a job or asking me on a date? Both, I suppose?" He pulled the car to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. "The truth is, Daniela, I've spent years building systems to keep people out. Then you got trapped inside and I realized what I'd been missing. A good meal?" she teased, though her heart was racing. "A reason to come out from behind my walls." His hand found hers, his touch tentative yet certain. I don't want to be trapped anymore, not in my mansion, not in my isolation. Daniela entwined her fingers with his. So what happens now? Now, Theodore said, leaning closer, we write our own recipe. 6 months later, the Reyes Culinary Academy welcomed its first class of students to the renovated east wing of the Morgan estate. The adjoining restaurant, named Trapped with a knowing irony, quickly became one of the most sought after. Reservations in the city. Theodore still maintained his private lab and continued his work on medical technology. But his study door remained. Open more often than closed. Could frequently be found in the restaurant during dinner service. Watching with undisguised pride as Daniela moved among the tables. Her passion for food and teaching evident in every interaction, their relationship. Evolved with the natural rhythm of seasons, cautious at first, then blooming with increasing confidence. They learned to navigate the complexities of their different backgrounds and the public interest in their unlikely pairing. On the 1-year anniversary of the security system malfunction that had first trapped them together, Theodore led Daniela to the restored herb garden, now flourishing under their shared care. I have something for you, he said, handing her a small, flat box. Inside lay a key, old-fashioned and ornate, nothing like the electronic security that governed the mansion. What does it open? She asked, turning it over in her palm. Nothing. Actually, Theodore smiled at her confusion. It's symbolic, a reminder that what once trapped us eventually set us free. Daniela looped the key on a chain around her neck, where it nestled against her heart. Some traps are worth falling into. Some walls are meant to be breached, he agreed, drawing her into his arms. Beyond the mansion's golden gates, the world continued its chaotic dance. But within the sanctuary they had created together, neither his alone nor hers, but something new, forged from the best of both. They had found a truth as simple and profound as the perfect meal. Connection was the ultimate luxury, and love the most valuable security system of all.